welcome to Retro Game Super Leagues, where I rank all of the games that I've played in a specific category. This is an idea that I've taken from the pages of Amiga Action magazine around the time that I used to write for it, and I've adapted it slightly for this channel. If you've seen episodes of this series before, then you know exactly how this works, but as I've covered different types of platform games already in previous lists, I feel like I should probably specify what an action platform game is before I get going on this one. Basically, all of the games featured here are ones where your ability to punch, kick, shoot, hack or slash enemies is just as important as your prowess in leaping from one ledge to another. As always, I'll be placing all of the games in one of 5 categories, ranging from essential to rubbish, and as this is based entirely on my own opinion, there are probably going to be rankings that you don't agree with, and if that's the case, I'd love to hear where you'd place these games in the comments. But as I've got so many games to go through in this video, 54 of them in fact, this video took a lot more work than I was expecting. I'm just going to stop waffling and get to the games. Okay, so we're going to start this list off with Aladdin, which was released in 1994 by Virgin Interactive. It is a beautifully animated version of the Disney classic movie, and to be perfectly honest, if you're not humming along to the songs as you play it, then you're playing it wrong. It is a better game on the Mega Drive, definitely. And the Amiga version does at least support 2-button joysticks, which makes it better. But I think this one has aged a lot worse than the Aladdin game that was produced by Capcom on the SNES, which is a completely different game and much better in my opinion, as this one has got level design that is pretty boring and uninspired. So yes, it's enjoyable, but there's nowhere I can put this one other than the good category, no higher than that, so that's where it's going. Next we have Alien 3, which came out in 1993 from Virgin Interactive. This one was produced by Probe Software, and this one cleverly ignores the fact that the movie only had one alien in it, and instead creates a game that is much more action-packed than that. The aliens themselves are perhaps a little bit too quick, as even with the use of the on-screen motion tracker, I found myself getting hit by them on a regular basis, and it's kind of too hard to avoid those hits. Ultimately, although it looks nice, there's not quite enough variety in the graphics, and consequently the levels themselves lack a little bit of character, although they do resemble the movie if I'm being fair. I think I will also place this one in the good category, but I think I would rather play it than Aladdin, so I'm putting it above that one. Next up we have a game from 1995 that I had never played before putting this list together, called Alien Fish Finger, which was actually released as shareware, and it's a very enjoyable, if a little bit short, gore-soaked shooter with a surprisingly intelligent enemies. Characters themselves are very tiny, but they're well animated, and that decision allows you to see more of the playing area, and it's got some really good sound effects as well, which are well above average. As it's a game that's still free to download today, it's well worth a look, even if it won't take you that long to complete it. So again, this one isn't going to go any higher than the good category, but I think I'm going to put this one above Aladdin as well. Next we have Arctic Moves, which didn't come out on the Amiga until 2017, when one of the original developers of it reverse engineered the Atari ST version and released it for free on the Amiga. It's produced by Spanish software company Dynamic Software, and it's the 3rd game in a series that began with Army Moves back on the Spectrum and Commodore 64. This is definitely a better game than either Army Moves or Navy Moves though, so don't be worrying about that one. The graphics are quite nice, with some good animation of the characters. The gameplay itself does feel a little bit limited for a 16-bit release though, and I found myself getting bored quite quickly, so nice that the game exists now, but I can't put this one anywhere other than the poor category. Next we come to Assassin, which came out in 1992 from Team 17, and this was the first game they published that was developed by Psionic Systems. It's a great looking, fast moving and smooth game with a unique hook. I absolutely loved the boomerang weapon that your character wielded in this one, although I will admit that the power-up system could have been a little bit simpler. Actually navigating the levels is really good fun, but the boss fights at the end of them are a little bit disappointing, and the reason why you can see this game listed twice here is that Team 17 did actually re-release it again the following year in 1993 as Assassin Special Edition, and that Special Edition made a lot of changes to the game that actually ruined the overall feel, as it removed a lot of the game's identity. So the original game is going to go in the recommended category for sure, whereas the special edition I can't put anywhere other than the good, and I'm going to put it below Aladdin. Next we have Astro Marine Corps, which came out in 1990, and this is another one published by Spanish software company Dynamic, and it is a woefully inept release, seemingly inspired by Contra, but it completely fails to understand what made that game so great. The characters are huge on screen and well animated, I'll give them that, but they move far too slowly for a game of this type, and it's way too easy to get completely stuck. I frequently found myself falling into areas where the only way that I could get out was by dying, and this game throws you all the way back to the start, and anyone who's a regular viewer of these lists knows just how much I hate that. So I'm going to put this one in the rubbish category. Next we come to Baal, which came out in 1989, released by the sister label of Psygnosis called Cyclops, and this was developed by Wayne Smithson. Anything good that this game does with its presentation, though, is completely undone by some terrible game design. The way that the screen scrolls makes it impossible to see where you're going most of the time, or where the enemies even are, and that's a critical fail. Something as simple as jumping over an obstacle or a gap is way too complicated as well. So once again, the only place I can put this one is the rubbish category, but it's definitely better than Astro Marine Corps. Next we come to the first of many arcade conversions on this list. This one is Bionic Commando, which came out in 1988, converted by Software Creations and released by US Gold. And to be perfectly honest, the graphics on this one look like they were simply converted from the 8-bit with a little bit more colour. But at least the music by Tim Follin is excellent. What ruins this game even more, though, is the fact that rather than scrolling smoothly, it's push scrolling when you get to the edge of the screen, and that completely ruins the flow of the game. And if you've played the arcade version, you'll know how important that flow is to it. The people who made this one went on to make Bubble Bobble and Assassin, so they clearly learned from their mistakes. But this one's also going to go in the rubbish category, and it's again better than Astro Marine Corps, but not as good as Baal. Next we have Black Tiger, which was converted from the Capcom original by Graham Lilly. Anyone who's played the arcade game knows that it's a pretty decent game, but this is a bad conversion of it. If you want to play it, then there are many ways available these days where you can simply play the arcade version. Shades of the arcade game are definitely still visible when you're playing this one, though, and although it's messy to look at with some very jerky scrolling, that makes it slightly better than some other conversions. And the controls are actually pretty decent, and it manages to overcome the problem of having only a single button better than most games, but I still can't recommend it. So it's not rubbish, but it's going to go in the poor category, and I'm going to put it below Arctic Moves. Next we have Cool Spot, which came to the Amiga in 1993, and this is a conversion of a Mega Drive game that I was never that much of a fan of in the first place. The central character is nicely animated, but it's way too difficult to see where you're going because of the stupid scrolling. Level design is incredibly frustrating, especially the section at the end of the first level where you have to jump between balloons, and every time you fall down you have to go all the way around and do it all again, and that I really hated that. I'm going to stick this one in the poor category as well, and I think I'm going to put it just above Black Tiger. Next up we have Dojo Dan, which came out in 1992 from Psionic Systems, just before they started working with Team 17 and made Assassin. And there's a lot to like about this game. It's got a really good martial arts theme with a great piece of music by Alistair Brimble. In fact, the presentation as a whole has got bags of charm to it, and I really liked the fact that all of the levels in it are completely non-linear, allowing you to choose your own routes through them. What drags it down a little bit is the fact that there are probably a few too many pixel perfect jumps required. The enemies constantly respawn and just get in your way all the time, and it's got a wildly fluctuating difficulty level, so although it's definitely worth playing, I can't really put this one anywhere other than the good category, and I think I'm going to put it just below Assassin Special Edition. Next we come to Exolon, which came out in 1989 from Hewson. and this is based on one of my favourite games that was ever released for the Spectrum, although the Amiga version is frankly awful. The graphics look like somebody just vomited up onto the screen and said that'll do. Consequently, you can't really tell what you can jump on, what you can shoot, what you can blow up, and that's kind of important to the gameplay. So the fact that it ruins such a great game in such spectacular fashion means that there's nowhere that this can go other than the rubbish category, and it's going to go right down there at the bottom, but I still think Astro Marine Corps is worse, so it's going just above that one. Now we come to the first Samurai, which came out in 1991, and I've already covered this one on the re-review. There'll be a link to that one in the corner if you want to watch, if you haven't seen that episode yet. There's no other way to describe this game other than an absolute Amiga classic. The graphics are excellent at all times and full of colour, but I think what elevates it even further is the frankly superb sound design. If I'm going to be hypercritical, I think the levels probably are slightly too big in the early stages, but thankfully exploring them is incredibly rewarding, so you'll never feel too disappointed by that. So there's nowhere I can put this one other than the essential category. Next we have Ghost Battle, which also came out in 1991 and is also a game that I've covered on the re-review. It's got a fantastic atmosphere created by the excellent graphics and great music, and they go a long way towards making this a game that's definitely worth playing. Your initial impressions of it when you first load it up might not be that high, but it's one of those games where the more you play it, the more you like it. As I said in my original video on it, the enemies themselves do take a little bit too much to kill, and that's probably the most frustrating thing about it. But I'm definitely going to put this one in the good category, and I'm going to put it just above Alien Fish Finger. Next we come to Ghosts N Goblins, which is released in 1990 on the Amiga by Elite Systems, and this actually came out after Ghouls N Ghosts. It's definitely one of the better arcade conversions that you're going to see on this list, and probably one of the best ones on the Amiga for that matter, with some great graphics and music. Feels like it was actually made by people who've played the original, which is always a bonus. It retains the challenge that you would expect from the game, and it works reasonably well on a single button joystick. So I am going to put this one in the recommended category, but it's going to go below Assassin. Now we come to Ghouls N Ghosts, which, like I said, came out the year before. This was like Bionic Commando. This was converted by Software Creations. As a massive fan of the arcade game, it gives me no pleasure whatsoever to report that this is a fairly ropey conversion of it. It's got bad graphics, unresponsive controls, and a complete lack of sound effects ruins it. And although the music that accompanies the game is pretty decent, it's not the iconic music from the arcade game, which is what you would want. So there's no way I can put this one other than the poor category, and I'm going to put it below Black Tiger. Next we have another game that was converted from the Mega Drive called Global Gladiators, which was actually endorsed by McDonald's, and this was also published by Virgin, and it's a much better Mega Drive to Amiga conversion than Cool Spot, but it has a lot of the same problems that game did, as it actually feels like it uses the same game engine. Jumping around the levels and shooting them with your goo gun is quite fun, but the scrolling isn't great, and there's far too many blind jumps. And the way that the screen lurches from left to right whenever you change direction is incredibly off-putting. So although like I said, it is better than Cool Spot, it can't really go too high up the list, but I think I am going to put it above Dojo Dan in the good category. Now we have Gremlins 2 The New Batch, released in 1990 by Elite Systems from a developer called Motive Time, and this is definitely an above average movie tie-in, with some great cartoon graphics that really do capture the humour of the film. The idea of using a torch as a gun is a great one, in my opinion, and there are plenty of additional weapons that you can pick up and throw, such as frisbees, and a power-up that has the little Rambo gizmo come down the side and shoot at gremlins as well. It's let down completely by a difficulty level that's way too high though. Many people will simply stop playing it, which is a shame. So again, going to go in the good category, and I think I'm going to put this one above Global Gladiators. Now we come to Hong Kong Phooey, released in 1990 by budget publisher High Tech Software. This was developed by Twilight Software, the people who made WWF WrestleMania and Alfred Chicken. And when you think about all the potential that this license has for making a great action platform game, the fact that it fails to capitalise on that in any way is an absolute travesty. The controls are terrible and unresponsive. Enemies and traps will inexplicably drain your health even if you're stood nowhere near them. And there's only one level, which is admittedly quite big. Being a budget game, though, is no excuse for being this shoddy, so this one's going to go right down in the rubbish category, and I think I'm going to put this one below Astro Marine Corps. Next we have Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the action game, released in 1989 by US Gold and developed by Tiertex. It was released at the same time as the LucasArts point-and-click adventure, and this one does actually look the part with some well-animated graphics, and it gets bonus points for actually being an action game, unlike the one that was released for the Fate of Atlantis. It's got some really nice touches to the gameplay too. I like the fact that the levels get gradually darker and darker, and you have to keep picking up torches in order to keep everything lit, and that also ends up giving the game a nice sense of urgency. Checkpoints are well spaced out, but overall the gameplay I think is a little bit too frustrating thanks to poor collision detection, so it's not quite rubbish, but I can't really put this one anywhere other than the poor category, and I think I'm going to put it between Ghouls N Ghosts and Black Tiger. Now we come to Jim Power in Mutant Planet, released in 1992 from French publisher Loriciel, and this is without question one of the best looking games on this list, but thankfully it's more than just a technical showcase. And it's all very playable and enjoyable, a very addictive challenge that's easy to recommend. If you're a regular viewer to UK Gaming Network, you may well have noticed that the music to this game is one that we use on the wait screen for some of our live streams. So I don't think it's quite in the essential category, but it's definitely a recommended, so it's going to go between Assassin and Ghosts and Goblins. Next we come to Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja, released by Elite Systems in 1993. And the best thing that you can say about this one is that the graphics are a fairly decent interpretation of the original, although the colours are incredibly washed out, making it look a little bit messy. It supports 2-button joysticks, and it's a good job that it does, because the single button controls are awful, requiring you to push down and then up in quick succession in order to do that all-important high jump. One thing that I found quite amusing though was the fact that the first level itself only took about a minute to get through, and then the boss at the end of it took me well over 5 minutes to kill, and was not a challenge in any way. The original is a great game, but this is a very bad conversion of it, so this one's going in the poor category, and I think I'm going to put this one above Ghouls N Ghosts. Now we come to Kid Gloves 2, released in 1992, and this is a game that was actually reviewed in 1991 by Games X magazine under its previous name of Little Bo, and we even gave away a playable demo of it on a cover disc. The title ended up being changed when the original publisher went bust and the game was bought by Millennium. Although quite why they wanted to link this to the original Kid Gloves is anyone's guess, as it's completely different to it. Fortunately though, it is an utterly charming, if unspectacular game that's well worth playing, although it's definitely aimed at the younger end of the market, as there's not much of a challenge to it. So this one's going in the good category as well, but I think I'm going to put it right down at the bottom below Dojo Dan. Now we come to The Killing Game Show, which came out in 1990, and I remember this one being one of my favourite games at the time of its release, and I even went on to produce a full player's guide for it in the pages of Games X. The constantly rising water level of all stages makes for a fast and frantic blaster with a lot of urgency to it. There's definitely a little bit of trial and error to the gameplay, but that's mitigated by the fact that every time you die, the game gives you a replay of your previous life, which you can fast forward your way through and then take over the controls at any point. And that's actually a stroke of genius for the gameplay. It's definitely a game that I would recommend, and I'm going to put it in the recommended category, and I think I'm going to put it above Ghosts and Goblins but below Jim Power. Next we have Leander, which was the first time that I ever heard the name Traveller's Tales. This was published by Psygnosis in 1992. It's an excellent, addictive and challenging title that announced its developer onto the world. There are moments where the platforms blend into the background a little bit too well, but that's only because that's the same as a lot of Psygnosis titles. I really liked the fact that it uses colour to represent the amount of armour that your character has remaining, and it's also a game that supports 2-button joysticks, which makes it even better to play. So this one I think is also going to go in the recommended category, and I think I'm going to put it below the Killing Game Show. Next we have Lethal Weapon, which came out in 1992, the same year that Lethal Weapon 3 hit cinemas, and it wastes a golden opportunity for co-op, because what is the one defining character of the movies? They're buddy cop movies, and yet for some reason this is a rigidly single player only game. You do at least get to choose between Riggs or Murtaugh as the character that you play as, but it doesn't really change the game in any way. It's got a nice variety of level locations, I'll give it that, and the graphics themselves are pretty decent throughout, and the scrolling is very smooth. However, it's got some horrendous difficulty spikes, which did put me off from playing it. It's hard for me to recommend, so I think I'm going to stick this one... Does it go in the good or the poor category? I think I'm going to put it at the top of the poor category. Next we have Lionheart, which came out in 1993 from German publisher Thalion, and I can vividly remember when I played this one back in 1993 that this was the only time that I ever saw a Mega Drive fanboy get jealous of what I was playing on my Amiga. It features some of the best graphics that I had seen in an Amiga game, with brilliant animation, detailed backgrounds, and great enemy design. The levels themselves are also very well designed, and it's a tough but fair challenge throughout. So this one's also going to go in the essential category, but I think I would still rather play the first Samurai than this one. Next we come to Mega Twins, which came out in 1991, published by US Gold and developed by Twilight. And this is a great conversion of a fairly average arcade machine. It's hugely enlivened by the inclusion of a 2-player mode though. There's a decent variety to the levels, and the boss fights are pretty entertaining but fairly simple. You'll probably enjoy every minute that you spend playing it, but there are much better alternatives out there. Yeah, so there's nothing especially terrible about it. So this one's going to go in the good category, but I'm going to put it below Ghost Battle. Next we have another movie tie-in from Ocean. This one is Navy SEALs, released in 1990, which is a surprisingly decent adaptation of a long-forgotten Charlie Sheen action movie. Thankfully though, you don't require any knowledge whatsoever of the source material. The levels are pretty large, but there's not a great deal of variety to them, and the time limits are extremely stringent, so unless you know the layouts off by heart, you're not going to get through them. It takes a little bit of time to get used to it, and the character movement isn't quite as smooth as you would have hoped, but overall I think it looked great, but it doesn't play quite as well as it looks. So this one is also going to go well down in the poor category, but I think I would rather play this one than Lethal Weapon, so I'm going to put it above that. Now we come to the Newzealand Story, which is definitely one of the better arcade conversions on this list. It's let down slightly by limited colours, which take away some of the charm of the arcade original. Thankfully though, it's very smooth and a lot of fun to play with some really responsive controls. Everything else about the presentation though is completely spot on, from the irresistibly catchy music to the fantastic level design. It is an incredibly tough challenge though, don't go expecting an easy ride, and this is a game that doesn't feature any credits, so once you die it's game over and you have to start again. Definitely a game that you should play, so this one's going to go in the recommended category, and I'm going to put it above Ghosts and Goblins. Next we have Onslaught, which came out in 1989 from Houston, and if you told me that this was a conversion from a Commodore 64 and Spectrum title, I would have believed you. Apparently though, it was an original creation for the Amiga and was then converted to the Atari ST and Mega Drive at a later date. It's frankly awful though. The graphics are horrible and overly cluttered, meaning that you can never see what you're supposed to be doing, and I hated every minute that I was playing it. This one's going to go right down in the rubbish category, and I think again I'm going to put it above Astro Marine Corps and below Exolon. Next we have Orc, which is the game that I covered on the re-review last week. released by Psygnosis and developed by WJS Design. It's got some nice atmospheric graphics, although the enemies and scenery do blend into each other a little bit a little bit too well on the first level. The sound feels incredibly out of place, with an overly loud machine gun and explosions. Fortunately though, it does have some really good music in it. The one part of the level design that I think stops it from being great is the fact that you can get completely stuck on the levels when you run out of fuel, and the only way to fix it is to restart the game. This one's going to go in the good category, and I think I'm going to put it above Mega Twins. Next up we have Paramax, which came out in 1991 from Kingsoft, and it's a nice colourful platform game with some smooth parallax scrolling, but it all feels incredibly empty. What enemies there are don't pose much of a threat to you either, and it's occasionally hard work to work out what you can actually stand on as you're playing it. And frankly, it all got boring very quickly. So this one's going to go in the poor category, and I think I'm going to put it below Cool Spot and above Black Tiger. Next we have Risky Woods, which came out in 1992 from Electronic Arts and developed by Dynamic Software. And this is an excellent Ghosts N Goblins style platformer that came out of nowhere. I remember it being a complete surprise. It's got some superb graphics and challenging gameplay. I did find while playing it that I got annoyed with the negative power-ups that you could pick up, which made the whole thing a little bit frustrating, as they're almost identical to the good ones. I think the game's economy is a little bit broken, as the power-ups that you can buy from the shop at the end of each level do cost a little bit too much, as it's far too easy to lose coins throughout the stages. And it's a shame, because despite how expensive they are actually a lot of fun to use. This one's going to go in the recommended category for sure, and I think I'm going to put it between Gym Power and Assassin. Next we have RoboCop 2, which came out in 1990 from Ocean Software, developed by Special FX. And this one has got some excellent presentation. The action is fast and constant and really enjoyable, but unfortunately 30 seconds into the first level you come across a bit of truly awful game design that almost ruins the game completely. There's a section where you have to jump on a lift and go up in order to reach the next platform, and as you're going up on the lift you can't pick up a power-up, because if you do you fall off and land all the way down at the bottom again. It quite frankly made me want to throw my joystick at the wall. And on top of that, some of those power-ups that you can pick up are negative ones, like ones that reverse your controls, and it made me upset to play it, to be honest. So this one's going to go in the poor category, and I'm going to put this one below Paramax. Next up we have Rolling Thunder, which came out in 1987, developed by Tiertex and released by US Gold. And this is one of those arcade conversions, of which there were many, where it felt like the developers never actually played the original. Basically, in the arcade version, all of the enemies that you come across have different coloured outfits that determine what their attributes are. Some of them will shoot bullets at you, some of them can jump, some of them can throw grenades, and it's all, you can instantly recognise each one. Whereas in this version, every single enemy is wearing green, and it ruins it completely. It shows a fundamental misunderstanding on the part of the developers as to what they were meant to do. Quite simply, don't play it. And it's an absolute shame, because the arcade version is one of my favourites. And this is going to go in the rubbish category, and I'm going to put it below Astro Marine Corps. Next we have Ruff N Tumble, which is a complete palate cleanse after enduring Rolling Thunder. This came out in 1994, published by Renegade from a developer called Wunderkind. This is a truly glorious Amiga game that everyone should play. Fantastic slick graphics, great level design, responsive controls. This game has it all. You could argue that the music is a little bit too much, but at least you can turn it off. And there's probably some people out there that will hate the level of difficulty that the game has, but for me this is easily going in the essential category, and I think I'm going to put this one above First Samurai. Now we come to Second Samurai, which came out in 1994, still developed by Vivid Image Design, and this one was published by Psygnosis. And to be honest, this is one of the most disappointing sequels I've ever played. A lot of the original game's charm has been lost. All the vibrant colours have been replaced with a bland grey look to the levels. Things do improve slightly once you get past the appalling, annoying opening level. So I would recommend that if you do play it, stick with it. It has a 2-player mode, which is completely unnecessary and doesn't really fit with the style of game. But that isn't to say that it can't be fun with a friend. So considering how good the first game is, I take no pleasure whatsoever in relegating this one to the good category. I think I'm going to put it below the Assassin Special Edition. Next we come to Shadow Dancer, which is a game that I reviewed in issue 1 of Games X, and it's a very good conversion of the Sega arcade game. It's just a shame that the graphics lack a lot of the colours that the original version had. Introducing a canine companion into the mix made for some great gameplay choices, and the level design absolutely makes the most of it. The developers managed to make the controls work quite well with a single button joystick. Shame it doesn't support 2-button joysticks, but if you are playing it on the A500 Mini, that doesn't matter, as you can program in the controls, and it makes the game a lot better. This one's definitely going to go in the recommended category, and I think I'm going to put this one just above Leander. Now we come to Shinobi, which came out in 1991 from Virgin Games, developed by Binary Design. Now, Shadow Dancer was one of the sequels to this game, but this version is terrible. It's got jerky scrolling, backgrounds that look like they're from the Spectrum version, and it's got a general lack of colour that makes the entire game look incredibly ugly. It's still Shinobi underneath all that ugliness though, so fans of the original will still manage to get some enjoyment out of it, but there are so many ways available today to play better versions of this game. In contrast to Shadow Dancer, this one feels like a lazy conversion of the Sega original, so just play that one instead. This one's going to go in the poor category, and I think I'm going to put it below Black Tiger. Next up we have Strider, which came out in 1989 from US Gold, and this is another game developed by Tiertex. And this one does actually successfully manage to capture the look of the arcade original, just in miniature. However, the fast action of the arcade original is way too slow here. I also found that it's got some really bad collision detection, as I was constantly wondering what had just hit me and why did I just die. It's playable enough, I suppose, in short doses, but even if you are a fan of the arcade original, you should probably steer clear of this version. So I'm going to put this one in the poor category, and I think I'm going to put this one above Joe and Mac. Now we come to Strider 2, which came out the following year. Same developer, same publisher as the first one. And this is an abject lesson in why you should not allow developers to go ahead and make their own unofficial sequel to an arcade game. It's got none of the well thought out level design that the original game had, and the difficulty is way too high. It's basically the laziest possible example of a lazy cache-in. It even has the same music and sound as the original. So this one's going straight into the rubbish category. Don't even think of playing it, and it's going to land below Bionic Commando. Next up we have Switchblade, which came out in 1989, published by Gremlin and developed by Core Design. This was made around the same time that they made Rick Dangerous, and that should be instantly apparent from the graphical style, as it's very familiar, although this game is very different to that one. It's got an interesting power bar based combat system that doesn't quite work as well as you'd hope, but it's still different enough to make the game stand out. I also really like the way that the levels only reveal themselves as you walk into rooms, which makes for some really interesting level design, and it also allows the developers to hide secrets all over the place. So this one's going to go in the good category, but no higher than that. And I think I'm probably going to put this one down towards the bottom of the good, so I'm going to put it just above Global Gladiators. Now we come to Switchblade II, which came out in 1991, and this one was developed by Gremlin themselves rather than Core, and it's a massive improvement on the original, and at times it feels like a completely different game entirely. although many of the features of the original are retained. It's got some excellent manga influenced presentation, and the gameplay is challenging but always fair. Just like the original game, the levels reward your exploration, but there are a few annoying little features like spikes that appear out of nowhere and hidden traps all over the place. But it's easily a game that's worth playing. I'm going to put this one in the recommended category, and I think it's going to go above Shadow Dancer. Now we come to Toki. Came out in 1991 from Ocean Software, developed by their French in-house team. I can remember back in 1991, I had never heard of Toki before I played this version, and it's now one of my favourite arcade games ever, and that's basically because of how good this conversion is. You could argue that the playing area on screen is quite small, and you probably die once too often because of the single button controls. But this is otherwise as pixel perfect as arcade conversions get, and it's definitely a title that I would recommend. So I'm going to place this one between Assassin and Risky Woods. Next up we have Torvak The Warrior, which came out in 1991 from Core Design, and this is probably the closest that the Amiga ever got to the Taito arcade game Rastan Saga, which Ocean did produce home conversions of, but not on the 16-bit systems for some reason. This one is clearly inspired by that arcade game, but unfortunately the action is a little bit too slow for my liking. The graphics are fairly decent, but both sound effects and music are quite forgettable, and it's spoiled a little bit by some of the collision detection not being that great. I think this one just sneaks into the good category, but right down at the bottom. I think I'm going to put it above Kid Gloves 2. Next up we have Total Recall, which came out in 1990 from Ocean Software, and this is your typical movie conversion, but despite having a central character that looks about as much like Arnold Schwarzenegger as I do, this is more entertaining than you'd think. The gameplay is incredibly basic though, as all you seem to do is run around, go up and down lifts, and run out of ammo. The most frustrating thing about it though is that you only have one life, so it's right back to the start every time you die. And we all know how annoying I find that, so this is going in the poor category, and I think it's going to go just above RoboCop 2. Now we come to Turrican, which came out in 1990, published by Rainbow Arts and developed by Factor 5. And the first game in this trilogy manages to successfully fuse the frantic action of a shoot 'em up with the more traditional platform elements like hidden power blocks and jumping on the heads of enemies. The graphics and music have aged incredibly well, and it looks just as good as it did in 1990. It's got some horrible, frustrating platform sections though, which do bring the game down a little bit. So this game is going to go in the recommended category, as it's definitely a game that you should play, and I think I'm going to put it just below Jim Power. Turrican 2 came out the following year, same developer and publisher as before, and basically this takes everything that was good about the original game and perfects it. The power beam when you hold down the fire button is now a thing of beauty. It's no wonder that a developer went out and made a PD game based entirely on it. You should seek that one out, it's called Super Obliteration. The music is some of the best ever on the Amiga, and there's now a Metroid style morph ball. The level design is also now near perfect, with only a few bad jumping sections. So this one is straight into the essential category, and it's going to go above the 3 games that are in there already. And now we come to Turrican 3, and basically the Turrican trilogy follows the blueprint for game trilogies to the letter. First game, good but flawed. Second game, perfecting that concept. Third game, ruining everything with features that nobody asked for. It's like in their attempt to give the visuals more detail in this one, they've made it look like a complete mess. And replacing the power beam with a grappling hook is one of the worst decisions that anybody could have ever made. There is an improvement though. It does now support a 2-button joypad, so no more pushing up to jump. But that's the only thing that's better. So this one is going to go in the good category, no higher than that, and I think I will put this one above Second Samurai. Now we come to Venus the Flytrap, which came out in 1990 from Gremlin Graphics. This is made by the same team who made Switchblade II, and it's not the most sophisticated game in the world, but it is a good looking and playable one. I loved the idea of controlling a robotic insect, and the way that it moves is excellent. The levels may be restricted by time limit, but you still need to proceed through them patiently and methodically in order to get the most enjoyment out of it. It's got a good selection of weapons, but it may take you a while to get to some of them. So although I did enjoy this one, I can't really put it anywhere other than the good category, and I think I'm going to put it just underneath Dojo Dan. Next up, we have Wolfchild, which came out in 1992 from Core Design, and this is an incredibly well-presented platformer with some excellent characters and environments. Gets off to a really good start too, with a great opening level. Unfortunately, the second level almost ruins it entirely. There are far too many ways to fall off the moving platforms, which force you to replay entire sections of the game over and over again, and I find that to be a really disappointing thing, as this is a game that I really wanted to like. There are probably going to be people out there who enjoy this one a lot more than I do, but I can't put this one anywhere other than the good category. And I think I would rather play Assassin than this one, even in its special edition form. So Wolfchild is going to go just below that one. And then for our final game, we come to Yo-Jo, which was released in 1993 from Playbyte and a developer called Scipio. And this is a absolutely brilliant game. It's got huge secret-filled levels that are begging to be explored with multiple routes through them, which encourage replayability. It's got fantastic graphics that are full of character and plenty of fighting moves that you can use and weapons that you can pick up throughout the levels. And it all just feels incredibly instinctive to play. It's got a two-player mode to it that can be a right laugh, but you can find yourself getting stuck on the side of the screen if you're not too careful. Quite how Amiga Action Magazine called this one average back in the day is beyond me, as this one's going to go straight in the essential category as far as I'm concerned. But both Turrican 2 and Ruff N Tumble are better, so it's going to go just below those two. So there we go, we got to the end eventually. That's 54 action platform games ranked for you. Like I said at the beginning, there's going to be rankings here that you probably will disagree with. And if that's the case, then please do let me know in the comments where you would put these games yourself. There will actually be a link in the description for this video linking to the Tier Maker website, where you'll be able to find this particular Super League and rank them all yourself. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do give me a like and subscribe if you did. And don't forget to come back next week for the next episode of the re-review. So thank you for watching. Until next time, happy retro gaming. Bye for now.